All right, who can define sociology? Alyssa. Social science that studies society and social behavior. Remember how the group affects you, how you affect the group. Sociological imagination. How can we best define that? Yes, Rita. The ability to see connections within the larger world and our personal life, and that ability also to take ourselves out of those personal social settings when we're studying them. Okay, so sociology is a social science. Therefore, it's backed by science. How is it different than common sense? How do we learn or gain common sense? Chris, how have you gained all of your common sense? What was that? You learned it at one point, your experiences. And the common sense of a Cary Grove kid is probably going to be different than the common sense of a student in Springfield, Illinois. Correct? Because it changes with location. So sociology is science versus really experience. Comte, Mr. Comte is the what of sociology? Father. Or the daddy, as Chris called him. He coined the term. Harriet Martineau. She is the what of sociology? Mother. Thank you. She brought it to America. Where did she study? Prisons and slave auctions. Remember, it was really dangerous for her to be doing those studies. 1800s, woman on her own. Herbert Spencer. Who can tell us about good old Herbert? Alyssa. Believed in social Darwinism. And how might we explain that? Fittest societies would survive, social wrongs would fix themselves. Today his views are seen as racist, but he's still a founder in sociology because he did bring the science to those studies. Or to his studies, not that one in particular. Karl Marx. Hannah, what did Karl Marx do? Yeah, conflict theory. The battle between the haves and have-nots. Emil Durkheim. Let me go up a little bit so you can see. We're still going. Emil Durkheim. Who could tell me about him? Anna, what was his study? What made him famous?
Well, he was like the first scientist to systematically apply the methods of sociology.
First professor, first to apply systematically science to sociology. He also studied suicide rates amongst Catholics versus Protestants. Looks like Weber, but pronounced Weber. Real quick, what will we say about him? It was this class that had the nice shoe on their poster. So why would we want a shoe on the poster for him? Put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? You'd also want to refer back to your chart on all of them, all of our founders of sociology, as a quick refresher. Latent function happens when? Lizzie. Oh. I can move it up. The latent function happens when, Lizzie, can you still tell me when the latent function happens? It happens, take a guess based off of the root word there. Later. Yeah. So smart. It's going to happen later. The consequence, it happens later. So what would be a latent function of school?
We get smart.
You get smart. You're in an awesome sociology class and meet your bestest friends ever. What would be the manifest function of school? The main function is to learn, to get educated.
To get a degree.
Get a degree. Because it gets smart, or meet your best friend forever. BFF. Dysfunctional. What would be, the dysfunctional is the negative consequence. So what would be a negative consequence of school? What was that, Corey?
Mago is crying.
Oh, Mago's crying. Maybe the dysfunction of that is that Mago's crying because his iPod was stolen. No, I made it up.
Stop crying, Mago.
A dysfunction of school would be detention, would be bullying. Bullying's the dysfunction of school. Functionalism. Dylan, can you define functionalism for us?
Society is a system despite which each person has a part to play.
Thank you for the textbook definition. So if each person has a part to play, what would be an example of where we would study or see functionalism at its best to say? Yeah, Anna.
Like family.
Family. Your role in your family. Your family cannot function if your dad doesn't pay the electric bills for you to have lights in your house. Or if you don't cook dinner for your family, no one eats. That's your function. Might not be, but that would be nice. Conflict theory. Good old Karl Marx and the conflict theory. And what would best describe that for us, Chris? I like that, fight for power. Because it could be between the rich versus the poor, the haves, the have-nots, teacher, student, parent, child. The interactionist perspective. Yes, Genevieve. Understanding that setting of the viewpoint of people are actually involved from it. So interacting with people to understand that setting, to that situation. And we can do that through 3 ways. Symbols. Remember our idea of apple for the teacher, jersey, uniform. Symbolic interaction. How might we define that? That would help us on our test. Sam. Yeah, when the cop has their uniform on, they have power. That is an excellent example. The idea of on Fridays, you could do an observation of a high school and you could see who plays sports, who has school spirit. You can tell who the teacher is in a room by just not even talking, but just watching through symbols. Ethnomethodology, what your videos were on. So how might we define that? So I know you can give me lots of examples because you were really awkward last week when you were videotaping.
5 minutes.
James. Who can help James out? Josh Cooperman. Invading personal space would be how you might study it. Oh, there. Thank you, Nicole. Studying that culture by breaking the norms. Dramaturgy. Remember, putting your best foot forward is dramaturgy because you know that you're being observed. What were our examples of that? Alyssa. Interview and first date. Thank you. Now, I have on here 7 steps of the scientific method. But on your sheet that we took notes on, you had 8. What was the 8th step that in high school you probably wouldn't do? Publish your data. What did you find out? You probably wouldn't do that, but we wanted to know that was the option for our future. 4 types of research design. Because you're going to just quickly review those steps tonight. And all you need to know is, what do they do? What is the purpose of each one? And we've gone over it, so because of time, we're going to move on. 4 types of research design. Survey. Interview. Experiment, which you did. You participated in that experiment when you made your videos on ethnomethodology. And observations. You also did observations when you observed what the people's reactions were. Variable. Who can define variable for me? Think back to science.
Something that changes.
Yeah, something that changes. Most basic definition, pretty simple. Tonight, your independent variable will be your time spent studying. Now that's not going to change, but the dependent variable will be your test score. So your time spent studying, if you spend 5 minutes, not so great for that test score. Spend an hour, you're probably going to get that A on the test. So the test score is changing. Time spent studying depends on you, and tomorrow that won't change, but your test score could change on that. Good? Questions, comments, concerns? I'll post this on my page, and then you'll also be able to use this to study.